This is a famous image series of models from World War II. The sailor kissing a nurse from World War II in Times Square in New York. And behind me is another image, another icon of World War II, the USS Iowa. What is she all about? Come aboard with me and we'll find out. We're on one of the icons of what was the U.S. Navy's one of the biggest battleship, the USS Iowa. And we're going to talk to Jonathan Williams, the CEO and president of the USS Iowa. First of all, welcome, and tell our viewers a little bit about the ship.
The battleship Iowa was built in early 1940s and put into commission in February 22nd of 1943. She saw service through World War II and most of the major battles in the Pacific and continued until 1948. She went out of commission in 1948 and came back in 1951 for the Korean War. And went out in 1958 and then back in 1983 for the Cold War to help Reagan's 600-ship Navy that he was building up and served till 1990.
She's had a very colorful history.
Oh yeah, longevity. It shows how powerful the battleships are. They're the only ones in the world still able to be brought back into service, and the United States has them, and so we keep it maintained today in case the U.S. Navy ever needs to pull it back.
I think one of the many interesting things about the USS Iowa is the fact that this ship has a very direct relationship to one of our presidents. So perhaps you could tell us why this particular ship is so unique.
Well, in 1943, when she went into commission, her first mission actually was to search down the Tirpitz in the Atlantic. So she served in the Atlantic, and then her second mission was to take President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to the Tehran Conference in November of 1943. And she was built with a bathtub to accommodate him, and also an elevator.
Wait a minute. She was built with a bathtub?
A bathtub to accommodate the president, who was obviously in a wheelchair at that point.
I would imagine that with all the wonderful things to see and do on the ship, the bathtub is probably one of the things that when people come aboard say, is this a ship with a bathtub?
That's a very common question. Yeah. Is this a ship with a bathtub? And yes, it is a ship with a bathtub.
Okay, so let's go and take a tour of the ship.
Into the wonderful captain's cabin, or what we call the president's cabin, which is where Bush, Reagan, and FDR spent his days on board here.
We're sitting in what I can only describe as truly luxurious quarters for a battleship, and I'm talking to Craig Post, who is one of the volunteers. In fact, he's the head of the volunteer. So Craig, first of all, tell us where we're sitting and what this is.
Well, actually, what we're sitting in is the captain's in-port cabin. Not important, in-port cabin. This was his cabin he would use when inviting dignitaries on board the ship. So it was meant to be a show cabin. Well, the cabin really has greater significance because just shortly after the ship was launched in 1943, set sail for the first time, she was called back to bring FDR across the North Atlantic to meet with Churchill and Stalin at the Tehran Conference. This was the cabin that FDR stayed in during that transatlantic voyage. The people that were on board this ship was almost the entire war cabinet for the United States at that point in time. You had Admirals Leahy and King, you had General George Marshall, all sitting here and putting the final touches on the D-Day invasion plan.
At this table?
At this table. Woo! So you had a lot of, if these bulkheads could talk, as they said, you'd have a number of different stories coming about this.
Another thing that is really fascinating for our audience is that just over there, what is in there?
Well, this is a U.S. Navy ship. In the Navy, you take showers. Now, as you know, FDR was most of the time in a wheelchair. Very difficult for him to take a shower. So the Navy actually built FDR a bathtub and put it in this cabin. Now, they had to get FDR up here, first of all, which is at one deck above where they would normally come on board the ship. So they built a special lift to get him on board and into this room.
Another thing that I find absolutely fascinating, one of the things that viewers may not know is, and I'm sure any American historian knows this, that FDR liked to keep the fact that he had polio and therefore, was not able to walk. And on our right here is a wheelchair, and I want you to tell me a little bit about it.
The fact that FDR and the press worked together, it was really a testament to both sides.
Yeah.
And FDR wanted to present a very strong image. The press agreed with that, and they never really photographed him in the wheelchair.
What is the number one attraction or thing that people say, I want to see?
Well, obviously, it's a battleship. The one thing that's striking everybody as soon as you walk on board the ship are those large 16-inch guns. And our guests get a chance to actually put their arm around the 16-inch gun. They stand right next to it to take that picture with that fabulous superstructure in the background. It is an impressive sight.
Give our viewers a sense of some of the interesting, fascinating things they can see aboard the ship.
The largest naval guns that are on the water even today, 16-inch 50 caliber guns. They fire a little over 24 miles. Iowa holds a record on that, which means we could hit City Hall from here at the LA waterfront. And then we head up into the bridge, the superstructure area, and you get to see the armored conning tower with 17.5 inches thick vault armor that protects the helmsman and the nerve center.
We're standing by what you may wonder, because we're standing by what is an open space deck, and you may say, why are we standing here? Actually, this has a very significant part in the USS Iowa. Tell us what it was.
This actually is the location of the elevator that was installed for FDR. I've been here since the ship came to San Pedro, and that whole time everybody has been wondering, where was the elevator? We've been asking, listening to stories told by old crew, and we've never really been able to nail it down. Just last week, one of our docents found, through an author, a photograph that we had not seen before, taken from a dirigible that shows where the elevator was.
And it was down here?
And it was right here. It was sort of tucked into this corner, and it was probably, as the best I can tell, 6 to 8 feet aside. It was a tall, square structure, a tall square tube.
And it was built specifically so Roosevelt could get in here and then come up to the room that we just saw.
Exactly. It was installed just at the time when he came on board and was uninstalled the time that he left.
What was the number of crew on the ship?
World War II was approximately 2,700.
Wow.
In the 1980s, it got down to 18 to 1900, just depending on the manning capabilities.
Tell our audience how many decks there are.
Deck-wise, well, there's about, at the deepest point, there's 9 decks down.
9?
9 decks down. What a lot of people do not realize is the stealth technology of the 1940s was not what the stealth technology is today. So what they did was they created ships that were really low in the water. On these battleships, they were low in the water, wide, and they were hard to see at 20 miles out. She's the last in the line of lineage of gunships.
I thought it'd be interesting for our audience to interview a couple of people who came on the Iowa. We're talking to Jaylene and Scott. Jaylene, why did you come on the Iowa?
I came with my husband. He has an interest in ships because he used to work on one.
What are some of the things that you've seen?
Well, I suppose it's a step back in time, and the guns alone, you know, the size of them and the scope of that, the amount of crew that it would take to operate them, it's very impressive.
Scott, what a wonderful name. The fact he's called Scott and from Scotland. Why did you come on the ship?
Well, I wanted to bring my wife on board to give her an experience, and because it's part of history, and I generally have an experience because I served in the Navy, and I just wanted to come back on board a ship.
Are you visiting from Scotland?
No, I actually live in Canada now, so I'm visiting from Canada.
You've always been interested in big ships?
Yep, and serving in the military back in the UK. I served in the Navy, so I've always had an interest in ships.
What kind of ship did you serve on in the British Navy?
I served on frigates and supply vessels and auxiliary landing ships.
This is a bit bigger than a frigate.
Yes, it is.
April 19th of 1989, during gunnery exercises, center gun of turret 2 exploded in an open breech explosion and killed 47 sailors on board. But you know, this is just a long line of gunnery incidents, and what a lot of people do not realize in San Pedro here is, you know, it was home to the battle fleet prior to 1939 when the fleet was moved over to Pearl Harbor, and the USS Mississippi actually had 2 turret explosions, 2 center gun turret 2 explosions. One in
That was kept secret.
Well, 1923 was the first one, and it occurred about 45 miles offshore of San Pedro here. And they came back into San Pedro, and I believe 46 sailors died in that. And they're buried around the area here. And in fact, the shell that was lodged in one of the barrels ended up firing off in San Pedro and shattered some windows and landed on the other side of a ferry on the way to Catalina. And then again in 1944, the Mississippi had an explosion.
You just touched on an interesting thing. You mentioned San Pedro. That prompts me to ask you, what is the ship's connection to and the relevance to being based here in San Pedro? And by the way, for our viewers, the ship is by the Vincent Thomas Bridge, just west of the bridge. But what is the significance of this ship to the local economy?
The local economy today, what the ship does for it and what the history of why the ship is really here. The history of it, home to the battle fleet. San Pedro was home to the battle fleet for many, many, many years. I think a piece of history people sometimes forget about, but it was probably home to the battleships much longer than many other areas. In addition, in 1969, the USS New Jersey was recommissioned in Long Beach Naval Shipyard, which was right across the water here off of Terminal Island. And in the 1980s, the entire Iowa-class reactivation program was put together in Long Beach and was managed within Long Beach. So the history to the battleships is deep right here and within a 5-mile radius. Today, what the Iowa represents is that long history of the Navy being in this area, the long history of our military being in the area, and it really connects people to what we call celebrating the American spirit. And by doing that, what Iowa's done is brought 330,000 visitors to San Pedro in the first year it was here.
How many?
330,000 visitors.
Woo!
And so that's increased. The economic value to the local area has been huge. It's really encouraged some extra development going on in the area here. And we're hoping to bring a real strong connection and what we call an American spirit connection within the San Pedro / LA waterfront area and really tell that story of a maritime town that goes years and years back.
I'm sure our audience would like to know 2 things. One, a phone number that they can call and a website.
The phone number is 8774-IOWA-61 or 446-9261 is the phone number, and our website is labattleship.com. This is a very costly endeavor. And we're constantly trying to improve it. Right now, our big thing is our overnight program, which will cost us about $400,000 to get ready for Boy Scouts and the kids. So
get ready for Boy Scouts?
Yeah, to have sleepaboards for local school kids and Boy Scouts. So anybody that wants to donate, we're looking to raise about $400,000 for that program right now, and hopefully to have it online soon. What we find with Iowa is kids, even though it's a historic item that we look at, kids just love it. I mean, it's something about the battleship. We see kids every day, and they're like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen."
We're standing on the stern of the USS Iowa, and this is where in days gone by she had not 1, not 2, but 3 helicopters. So this is the landing pad for those aircraft. I urge you to come on down to this wonderful representation of the U.S. Navy, the USS Iowa, one of 4 great battleships in the U.S. Navy fleet. As you can see, she is truly an enormous ship. It is fascinating, riveting, and I know you, yes you, will find it absolutely intriguing. Until next time, thank you very much for watching, and please come on down to the USS Iowa. I'm John Clayton, and I thank you for watching.